Global Order. I'm Hindu Gupta. Joining me from Japan is the former special advisor to Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, Tomohiko Taniguchi. He's been on Global Order before, but today I requested him to join me for a very special conversation. Japan has just had its first ever woman Prime Minister, a woman who is famously a workaholic, determined, and some would say conservative. Is this the Prime Minister Japan really needed at this moment? And can she turn the country around in a moment of severe disorder around the world? To discuss all that, Tomohiko Taniguchi, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
I want to jump in then with the first question, which is that tell me, you've known the Prime Minister, the incumbent Prime Minister, for a long time. Tell me your sense about the kind of woman she is.
In one of the previous elections for the party leadership, the leadership for the ruling party, the Liberal Democratic Party of Japan, I know that Prime Minister Shinzo Abe worked very much hard to gather votes on her behalf. And she also helped build Ms. Takaichi's campaign platform in some respects. So some say, and I agree, that Sanae Takaichi is a protege to the late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Is she the kind of person that Japan needs at the moment? I would say yes, because the previous leadership has failed a number of times, at least 3 times, in winning the political elections, nationwide as well as in the Tokyo Metropolitan Assembly. So the star, if the LDP had any, has fallen quite dramatically after losing the majority in both houses, the lower and the upper house. Unlike some other countries, including India, Japan's upper house, called House of Councillors, is a powerful veto organization. So it's very much important for the new Prime Minister, Sanae Takaichi, to bring back a sizable majority in both houses. So it's a challenging, winding road ahead, and Sanae Takaichi, I think, is very much prepared to tackle those difficult issues. As you say, she is known to be a workaholic, and I think she's proud of it. For her, as she spelled out, work-life balance can be as foreign as you can imagine. So let's see what she could deliver.
In many parts of the world, Shinzo Abe was seen as the man who was really transforming Japan, who in a sense was, some would say, taking Japan back to, in a sense, its glory days. There was talk about Abenomics or Abe economics, the unique growth-oriented economics of Shinzo Abe, but also there was talk about how he wanted, in a sense, to close the ghost of the past in Japan and really, in a sense, re-energize Japan, including remilitarize Japan in a way that it hadn't been for many, many decades. Do you think the new Prime Minister, being a protege of Mr. Abe, would follow similar vision?
It is not actually so much a question as to whether the new Prime Minister could follow the course set by Shinzo Abe, as what sort of environment Japan finds itself in. The environment that surrounds Japan has become even more challenging, and the provocations daily exerted upon Japan by China have gained both frequency and depth and width. The situation around Japan has gotten even worse than when Shinzo Abe was in office. You said militarization. It is long overdue. I for one am of a view that Japan needs to increase its defense spending much, much more substantially. And Sanae Takaichi said an interesting thing that when you think about military spending, you might think of that as something wasting your assets. It's not the case. Sanae Takaichi said, if you spend on salaries and wages on the military personnel, that would come back as consumption in the macro market. And if you spend R&D money and so on high-end, cutting-edge military equipment, that would have a spillover effect, and that could boost Japan's industrial base once again. So those are some of the new ideas that Sanae Takaichi has mentioned, and judging from what she has said, I think it's fair to say that on those points that you said, Sanae Takaichi can be seen as a disciple, protege of Abe.
Take those 2 points one by one. Let me begin with the first part. You spoke about daily provocations increasing from China to Japan, daily provocations, daily insults, daily riling of Japan by the Chinese administration, by the Chinese Communist Party and its military apparatus. Talk to me a little bit about what these provocations are. How should the world outside China and Japan understand these provocations?
It's become so much a daily phenomenon that the world has ceased to pay substantial attention to what's going on around Japan. But hardly a day goes by without looking at Chinese vessels entering into either Japan's so-called contiguous waters or outright territorial waters. And when it comes to Chinese Air Force, the intrusion into Japanese territorial airspace has gained frequency. And if you look at the map and see where Japan is, it is critical for Japan to safeguard the sea route that stretches from the Middle East via the Indian Ocean, Straits of Malacca, and Southeast China Sea, East China Sea, and ending up in Japan. If you lose that connection, Japan could not fuel itself, Japan could not feed itself, so much being hinged upon the safety of the South China Sea and around the Senkakus. It is vitally important for Japan to increase its deterrence capacity. But to do that alone by itself does not suffice. You need to do it jointly with like-minded partner nations. Who are they? The age-old military alliance partner of the United States, but more recently the Philippines and Australia. And South Korea, I think, has leaned more towards this maritime democratic alliance. And so one should hope that South Korea will also be a very much viable partner to this network.
Let me ask you, in all that things that are happening in the Ukraine war, the condition in the Gaza Strip, and so on and so forth, do you feel, you just mentioned once again, and of course that's true, how, in a sense, Japan's main military alliance is with the United States. Do you think the Indo-Pacific and what's happening around Japan is being forgotten, especially by the United States?
You cannot actually make a criticism about the United States, about what they are doing on both fronts, the Middle East, Europe, and the Indo-Pacific theater. It is very much incumbent upon the biggest democratic nation in the Indo-Pacific, that is Japan, to continue to safeguard the security and peace in the neighborhood. And after doing its own fair share, you can say to the Americans, look, we're hosting the biggest military footprint that you have ever had outside the United States on Japanese soil. So if you lose Japan, imagine what sort of status, position the United States could still enjoy. So those are the questions that Japanese leaders should raise to the American leader, and I think it's going to be very much an important opportunity when Donald Trump makes a stopover later this month in Japan to meet for the first time the new Prime Minister. I hope that that meeting is going to be an occasion, an opportunity to reassure that Japan and the United States seamlessly must work together to both the American audience and the Japanese audience, but beyond that, to the international audience.
Let's then turn to the other part of what you said, which is the efforts that will be made by the new Prime Minister in this remilitarization process. You mentioned two things. One, of course, was R&D. The other was spending more. I assume you also mean spending more to buy from other arms manufacturers in other parts of the world. Talk to me a little bit about how you see this proceed. Do you see Japan buying a lot more from around the world, or do you see Japan has always had a almost legendary status in terms of developing technology, and do you see some of that coming back into play for military use?
The Ukrainian war has altered dramatically how the warfare is being conducted. Instead of expensive platforms such as military tanks, there are many, many cheap weapons arsenal you could use to make decisive attack over those heavily armored vehicles. So much being the case, Japan needs to be open for new innovations, and Japan needs to maintain its open attitudes and learn more from other nations. I think India and Japan's relationship for that matter, would be very much important because we could share some of the cutting-edge military technologies together. So spending more is important. Spending more for military equipment is important, but wisely spending is even more important. And also, you must make the nation robust. This country has been living under the assumption that no warfare is going to be taking place in and around the nation. So many airfields are not covered. Many storage spaces for bullets and missiles are not covered. And don't forget, Tokyo is the most densely biggest capital you can imagine in the world. What about shelters? We don't have many. To say bluntly, we don't have any shelter. So building shelters is part public consumption, part military spending, part making the Japanese environment more robust. You could kill 2-3 birds with one single stone, namely spending more on those facilities. So those are the things that I think Sanae Takaichi is thinking about. Actually, she said in her campaign trail something like that a number of times.
Since you mentioned this, I want to quickly ask you, there's been speculation or there's been talk that in a sense, in Prime Minister Takaichi, Japan has found its Margaret Thatcher. From an Indian perspective, I would say found its Indira Gandhi in a sense, a woman of great purpose, steel, and really the moral courage to do and take many tough decisions. Do you see her in that vein?
To answer your question, in the case of Margaret Thatcher, it took a bloody war, Falkland War, without which Margaret Thatcher would not have developed her steel. So it's an open-ended question. But I think she could become something like that if you consider how she has developed herself since young. When she was a high schooler, she was a motorcyclist. She was a drummer of a punk rock band, and her parents refused to support her college tuition. So she financed all the college tuitions by herself for the 4 years. And since becoming a politician, she once again refused to mingle together male senior members of the same party, and actually had very much reluctance in entering the smoke-filled wining and dining opportunity with those senior male members of the party. Instead, she delved into studying one paper after another, every day, all day. So I sometimes found myself, odd, looking at how much encyclopedic knowledge she has put together, assumed in herself, ranging from, let's say, military, finance, industrial policy, welfare, diplomacy, and so on and so forth. Members of the bureaucracy cannot and should not take her lightly, take her for granted. It's a monstrous sort of figure when it comes to the command of policy items.
I want to ask you, it's very evident that you know a great deal about the incumbent prime minister and have known her for a long, long time. In all the time that you have known her, how would you describe your relationship, and what is the most interesting thing that has struck you about the person and the politician that she is?
I have been constantly struck by how short sleeper she actually is. When I send an email at, say, 2 o'clock after midnight, then she will come back to me with another email at 4 o'clock in the morning. And she is a caretaker of her severely sick husband. She usually comes back home at about 11:30 after spending a lot of hours with her colleagues, especially during the campaign, as to what next day they should do, and so on and so forth. And only after coming back at 11th hour, she gives care, like bathing her husband, because her husband insists that bathing service is the one that he wants her to provide him. And after giving such a sort of service to her beloved beloved husband, only then she prepares for the next day's interviews and next day's meetings, and so on and so forth. So I would imagine, I'm not so out of mark here. I think she has slept only 2-3 hours every day. So this is not good as prime minister. So the challenge for her, ironically, is to strike a good work-life balance. Although she proclaimed that the phrase work-life balance should remain foreign to her, and she said she should work and work and work and work. That's become a buzzword, but the real challenge for her is to strike a very good balance between work and life, because as prime minister, as commander-in-chief, as the biggest vision pursuer, she must sleep a lot, and that's something that she should try to do herself.
Start to talk a little bit about her economic vision. We began this conversation by talking about the late Shinzo Abe's economic vision, very growth oriented, very trying to revitalize Japan. None of us have forgotten when I was a schoolboy, it was Japan which was going to be the real challenger to the United States as one of the most fastest rising great economies of the world, highly technologically advanced, and so on and so forth. But that dream obviously crumbled in a certain way. And Shinzo Abe was seen as the man who was going to bring it all back. Talk to me a little bit about the incumbent prime minister's economic vision. How do you think she's going to proceed? as far as the Japanese economy is concerned?
A short answer to your question is, her idea is growth counts much, much more than fiscal prudence. Fiscal prudence is important, but without growth, you cannot make both ends meet anyway. Yes, Japan's accumulated government debt is big in size, but you only can solve that issue by generating growth and more growth. And I think it's important because the entire generation between 40 and 53, 55 in Japan, those workhorses, if you like, of Japanese economy, did not know much about what growth is like. That sets the Japanese generation very much apart from your own in India. Your generation has witnessed a remarkable rise of India's economy and India's international standing, but your corresponding generation in Japan is the one that's lost self-esteem, that's lost self-efficacy. So Sanae Takaichi must be, just like Shinzo Abe, the cheerleader-in-chief. And no economic package, however sensible it is, does not work if the Prime Minister leaves after taking only 1 year, for instance. So she must aim at sticking to her position much longer than average. She should aim, for instance, at staying in office for 5 years. And so that's a circular argument. If you want to stay for 5 years, you need to win national elections multiple times. How could you do that, being a minority government in both houses? So it's a mounting challenge, but I know she is willing to tackle those mounting challenges as the nation's first ever female prime minister, and as someone who was not born into privileged political family, as a self-made person.
Let's talk a little bit about how she will proceed to do this. What do you think would take to revitalize and re-energize the Japanese economy? This lost generation that you're talking about, which did not see the success story of Japan in the 80s, who in a sense perhaps lost hope. What would it take to trigger them back towards growth? And my other question is that it is indeed true, as you point out, that Japan has had a lot of political turmoil. How do you think she would be able to emerge out of this political turmoil and get the stability that is desperately required if the growth that you're talking about actually has to pan out?
Which is why she needs to do a rocket start. You've got a window of opportunity starting soon, later this month until the end of this year, and the next parliamentary session will convene in January, and it will last normally about 6 months. Those being windows of opportunity, and she has to pass some of the legislative bills to first help support those poor families that have been suffering from rising prices and inflation. And she needs to implement some of the policies that she said during the campaign that she would do. And only by succeeding those legislative attempts, then she could develop confidence in herself and across the ruling party of dissolving the lower house and calling snap elections. And she definitely must win the election, perhaps in the first half of the next year. So only by so doing, she could develop a snowballing sort of effect, and if possible, she could win back trust from an increasing number of voters that have been pretty much disappointed by the recent, let's say, policies and or the lack thereof shown by the Liberal Democrats.
What does it mean for Japanese society at large to have its first women or woman prime minister, in such a leadership position for the first time? What does it mean for Japan to have its first woman prime minister at a time when, for instance, even America has never had a woman leader, woman president?
Right. I think it's we should take some more time to see what sort of cabinet members she will pick up. She hinted that there will be more cabinet ministers, female cabinet ministers than ever before. So the family photo that you have after putting together the new cabinet, she hinted would be much, much more colorful with red, yellow, pink, and so on and so forth, rather than gray and black and pinstriped necktie tied people. So I think it's going to have a subliminal effect to the nation's psyche. And also, you could say there have been much, much more members of the board in the corporate Japan. There have been more managers, female managers in corporate Japan. And for the first time in the history, Japanese Navy, called Maritime Self-Defense Force, has had an increasing number of submariners who can man a submarine, who are women. So that's been all an outcome of Shinzo Abe's mantra that Japan must be a society where women can shine. Abe's Womenomics has had a positive outcome for that matter. Only based on that, I would say the selection of a female member has been largely accepted as a positive and welcoming development.
I have two last questions. My first question is that Japan used to be known by these giant technological and manufacturing companies, whether it's in auto, even today, whether it's in auto, whether it's in consumer goods and so on and so forth. Some of the luster of those companies have really dimmed a little bit. Some would say dimmed a lot, in fact. And that rising tide of entrepreneurship doesn't seem to have really triggered off in quite the same way. What do you think will be the new Prime Minister's focus to get the big conglomerates, big companies back in shape, trying to take global position wherever they can, once again, competing with American companies, Chinese companies, even Indian companies? Or do you think it will be more focused towards triggering a wave of grassroots entrepreneurship so that a lot more people can feel energized?
It is not either or, it's actually both. You must do a lot. You cannot actually pick up one single industrial area. The days when Japanese conglomerates prospered cannot come back. You must focus your attention, you must focus your capital on clearly defined areas. And those clearly defined areas themselves are changing. Today, AI, tomorrow, that's going to be something else. So you need to be agile. In order for you to be agile, a big entity cannot be so much agile. And Sanae Takaichi must be aware of this. And she mentioned that there are many unknown, untapped resources in universities and institutions and think tanks and so on and so forth. For instance, new technology to generate power and much, much more efficient way to consume power. You know, those are the areas that Japan could still excel, and those are the areas where the finished products, Japanese finished products, could find a wider international market. Now, there is there are very few Japanese industrial leaders that are aiming at overcompete the United States. Rather, they know that when it comes to developing deep space, if you like, when it comes to exploring AI and so on, you need to team up together. And I think it's a friendly alliance that is going to be important. So in order for Japan to do that, you need to open yourself for innovation, not only from within, but also from without. So that's the thing that I should say to your question.
I want to conclude by two quick questions. One question is that, I just read in the Balkans a foreign minister saying the world is preparing for war. And very recently, a former foreign minister of Syria told me that he's also convinced that war is coming. From a Japanese perspective, what do you think? Do you also feel that the world is headed towards war? And the caveat question to that is that under this new prime minister, do you think Japan will take one more step towards nuclearization?
No, I think I can give you an assuring answer on that. But again, Japan could be a force maximizer, a force multiplier, and force enhancer, using allied and friendly power deterrence capacities of their own. Why cannot Japan host nuclear-powered, nuclear-armed strategic submarines of the United States, of the UK, and of Australia, if Australia could have that capacity in the long run? South Korea has hinted that possibility already. Why wouldn't Japan be able to do that? So by so doing, Japan could develop its nuclear deterrence capacity. It is very much irresponsible of a world leader to say something like that. Would you like to have a war of any kind?
No,
I think
never.
the world leaders must speak in one voice that the war should not be ushered in. And how can you do that? You must be strong. You must be strong militarily, but you must be strong economically as the foundation. I think that's the only path that countries like Japan, and for that matter India, should seek.
As always, a riveting conversation. No doubt we'll be watching the path of Japan's first woman prime minister very, very carefully from an Indian point of view, but also from a global point of view. Thank you very much, Tomohiko-san.
One
Please,
last
please,
thing.
please.
Under the previous prime ministers, there was not actually much zeal on the part of the Japanese side to further develop India-Japan relationship. I think that's going to change, because Sanae Takaichi thinks herself being a protege of Shinzo Abe, and nowhere else than in India, Shinzo Abe has left a big mark. So that's the last thing that I should add.
Shinzo Abe was a great friend of India, and indeed, Indian leaders thought of Shinzo Abe as great friends of theirs. Special relationship also with India's incumbent Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Thanks very much. As I was saying, always a riveting conversation with you, Tomohiko-san. Thanks very much for joining me from
Thank
Tokyo.
you. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks
Okay.
very much for your time.
All right. Bye-bye.